Welcome to this Fireside chat. I'm really happy to be here today to air with Gabriel. He's the head of growth of Moonee and one of the best clients I ever had, so really glad to have this conversation together. As you know, we're going to be discussing about, it's a Fireside chat about the industry, how things are shaping between M&As and the economic situation, and of course, the point of view of a hyper-casual studio like Moonee. So, would you like to make an intro, Gabriel?
Yes, sure. Nice meeting you all. My name is Gabriel. I'm leading the growth team at Moonee, which is basically UA and monetization. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I want to tell you that if in any point of this session you feel boring, we are streaming the World Cup on another tab. So just let us know. We'll move to the World Cup.
Germany is playing and Spain is playing in 1 hour, so I think it's going to be exciting. But speaking of something even more exciting, let me share the agenda for today. So actually, we're going to be speaking first about the market, how did it evolve in the last years. Then we'll move into the industry itself, how M&As and mergers and acquisitions are shaping it. After this, privacy, probably the biggest thing that happened in the industry in the last years. Of course, we'll be speaking about iOS 14.5 and how Moonee adapted to it. And finally, how hyper-casual developers like Moonee are getting used to the upcoming economic situation. So without further ado, let's start with the first one, which is market evolution. Gabriel, what do you think about the evolution of the market in the last years?
So first thing, I believe that the chart behind me, it's a very clear and good representation of what have been happening in the last few years. Pandemic started, there was a huge boost in demand on everything that was related to online entertainment, including, of course, mobile games. We can see the trend on the VC investments in the US. And of course, that boost in demand came to the expense of a decrease in demand in other sectors, such as, for example, hospitality, travel, so on. So what happened is that investors saw a big opportunity because this sector was growing really fast. So they reallocated budget from traditional industries to this new industry, like not new, but still not as mature as other industries, due to the potential of this industry of generating high growth. What happened was that we were talking about growth, but we didn't talk about profitability. So in the long run, it's not sustainable to talk only about growth without talking of profitability. The pandemic ended, something like that. So budgets started to relocate from these new investments and ideas and companies to more traditional industries. So right now what we're seeing is that the market was prepared, like the ecosystem was prepared to receive more investments, but these investments are not actually coming. So we need to rethink of how is the activity in the gaming industry taking place. This situation, like we should add for sure that we are living in a high inflation rate world with high interest rates, that what they are doing is to take more of the money of these investors to go to something safer. And well, there are a lot of layoffs recently. There have been going on and they will be happening now and in a couple of months from now. So we actually expect the situation to be even more challenging in Q1 and Q2 2023.
Great point. Did you change any of your KPIs looking at the current economic situation, or are you still focusing on the same as before?
So actually for us, we're really lucky at Moonee. We always thought of growth and profitability as something that goes together, both for us as a publisher and to the studios we're working with. So it's not that actually something changed for us in that sense. Of course, there are challenges. One thing is when talking about profitability, we need to find the right trade-off between profit margin and absolute profit. At the end of the day, what we care the most is about absolute profit. So there's a lot of game of playing in terms of what profit margin is the one that will actually allow me to have the highest absolute profit while growing. So profitability and growth actually are things that go together, and we have been handling this in this way since the conception of the company. Something that I do want to say, that even though we are not making any changes in terms of how we're looking at KPIs and our strategy in terms of growth and profit, we are seeing an evolution in the industry, that we'll be talking about this later on, in which games itself are getting more complex. Like people, users want something different.
Great point, and I think it makes total sense. So actually, I think that's a big trend right now. So moving on to the second topic, which is, I think the clicker is not working, but let's move. The slide was not interesting. The interesting thing is the discussion. So second topic was the industry evolution, and especially how M&As and mergers and acquisitions are shaping it. What do you think about it? Because probably as a hyper-casual developer, you have a big opinion on it.
One word, consolidation. This is the first word that is popping in my mind when talking about acquisitions in the gaming industry. I was going to say, if you look at the image behind me, but it will be the same as the now. I think this pyramid is a very good explanation of how the gaming industry works. We have a few companies in the top that they are sharks, and the lower we go in the pyramid, we have smaller companies with different objectives and different goals. A good example of this can be, we can say that Take-Two, they acquired Zynga, Zynga acquired Rollic recently acquired Popcore. So this is a consolidation process that we have been seeing. It's not new to us, but we are expecting it to accelerate now that actually finance from investors, we discussed based on the market, it's going down. So this consolidation process is helping specialization, and it's actually very interesting to see how companies are evaluating other companies for their ability to find a niche product or to bring hits. If we think about like mergers and acquisitions in the past, we actually can now see that profit is there. Like mergers and acquisitions are being done in profitable companies compared to other companies that in the past, it was more related to growth.
Great point. I have a question regarding a hyper-casual perspective, and it's, do you find the current situation with all the M&As that have been going on from a hyper-casual perspective more challenging, or it doesn't really make a difference when you face your competitors?
Look, I honestly believe that competition is good. We have bigger players in the market, we have smaller players in the market, but for us to be able to say that, to talk about industry and not to talk about specific markets, there must be leaders and followers. Something that is really important is that actually the leaders are the ones setting the pace of the industry. However, what we are actually seeing is that when competing to smaller, relatively smaller, of course, hyper-casual publishers, we need to talk about efficiency. Leaders are leading the market, are setting the direction. However, innovation is usually coming from smaller publishers and smaller studios. So as Moonee, we really enjoy that the competition is not only against bigger publishers or smaller publishers. It's that both of the sides are making us better, because in one sense, we need to be very efficient to win, and in the other hand, we need to be really precise, and we need to find that niche market that will actually allow us to beat our competitors.
Great point, and totally agree that makes sense to think global and not local. So moving on to the third topic, privacy. Probably the biggest thing that has happened in the industry in the last years. Of course, iOS 14 is the main thing, but what do you think about it, and how did Moonee adapt to this?
So I guess you had a few sessions about this today. I know it's a very repetitive topic. So in our perspective, we believe that privacy changes make sense. They are aligned with user preferences. They are aligned with where the market is heading. And actually, specifically for us, these changes were really good. We are a really dynamic company. And if a company is dynamic and can adapt to new situations and new systems, it's the moment where we can actually boost our performance. iOS 14 is the lead of the privacy changes, for sure, in the mobile gaming landscape, in the mobile itself, actually. And it's only logical. Like, if we think about this change, it's really logical because think about Apple, that what they're selling is a product. And what they're selling is privacy, security. And most of I went through Apple's annual reports or quarterly reports. Most of the revenue is coming from the product side. So they want to improve their product to users. Of course, they didn't really thought of how, or didn't really care, how this was impacting like other companies in the ad tech ecosystem mainly. We needed to adapt. Everything changed when iOS 14 started. We saw how budgets moved from iOS to Android. You didn't really know what was going on. One day CPI was really high, another day CPI was really low. eCPMs were always getting lower and lower and lower and lower. However, as everything in life, we adapt. And if we are checking the trend right now, we are seeing that actually the relationship between iOS and Android, it's pretty similar or heading there to pre-iOS 14 levels. But the interesting thing about this is that we are seeing this change in the structure with an increase in iOS and not with a decrease in Android. So that means that what Android actually increased in market share stayed there, and now people is spending more money in advertising and bringing users in iOS. So overall, I believe that the effect in the long run was good because it helped us to learn how to properly do user acquisition in Android. And now we are getting back to iOS, but we know how to handle both of them and how to maximize both of them.
I love how you approach it, and actually this is something we are discussing a lot with the UA team. If you would like to give one key takeaway to the audience here today, especially coming from a hyper-casual perspective, what is one thing you're doing right now for tackling this, let's say, measurement environment where it's not so easy to understand where iOS users are coming from that you were not doing before, or any best practice that you implemented after iOS 14.5?
Of course, it was a flow. Like, the things that we know now are not the things that we knew like when we started. As a company, we got ready for iOS. We started to test ATTs before iOS 14 was actually implemented, A/B testing a lot. We found the right combination. So when iOS 14 was actually mandatory, we were able to start with data, knowing that most likely, because you can never know, our ATT allowance rate was going to be high, relatively high. So we split between old games and new games because the situation was complicated. In old games, we knew from where value was coming. In new games, it was not possible to know from where value was coming. So in new games, we started to gradually open platform by platform and understanding what was the effect, not on the LTV, not on the CPI, but on the return, measuring it as revenue and costs. So it was either your ROI, it's decreasing over time, or your ROI, it's increasing over time. So we knew that we were heading to the right direction. And at the end of the day, with more knowledge, we also started to work with average attributed LTV and average attributed CPI. That means that let's blend all of our costs together. It doesn't really matter from which platform these users are coming, but the max bid that I can use on average is this. And I expect to return, on average, this amount. So this actually gave us a really good perspective and a huge potential to scale. It seems that the approach was good. I won't say excellent because there's nothing like excellent, but it was good because it actually allowed us to scale iOS 14, iOS users a lot. And right now we're again like above Android level in terms of iOS users. And I think that was pretty much it. Of course, we also focus on more things that are not only related to iOS, but to the flow itself. For example, in the hyper-casual industry, if you go back a few years, ASO was something that was actually way much more related to casual games and not that much for hyper-casual. Maybe yes in terms of conversion rate, but not in terms of organic installs. So we added an extra layer of ASO to be able to catch more organic users in iOS because we felt that our competitors were not only hyper-casual games, but were also casual games in aiming to catch Dutch organic users. They might churn, but it's still an organic user. So UA also is also getting more complex. In the past, it was only CPI, then it was CPI and ROAS. Now we are talking about CPI, ROAS, CPA, and CPE. But actually, I believe that this is more related to our next topic, so I will save it for later.
Totally. So moving on to the last topic, which is hyper-casual perspective into, well, everything that's going on, right? There's policy changes, there's privacy changes, there's the economic situation. How is Moonee adapting to this, and what is your view on this?
The first thing is that, as I mentioned before, there's an evolution in the industry. Back then, hyper-casual market was well known for the low entry barriers. That this is actually still true. It's relatively easy to enter the hyper-casual market. But the evolution that we're seeing is that the industry is heading to something way much more complex. Let's think that it's a really crowded market. CPIs are increasing. eCPMs are decreasing as part of the crisis. It's interesting to understand why CPIs are increasing while eCPMs are decreasing, but that's another discussion. And what we're seeing is that also including the fact that there is less demand for ads, the complexity of the games is increasing. Like back then, you were thinking about returning your user after 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 1 week. You were really aggressive. Let's talk about a month. Now, the trend in the industry is to add more meta and more complexity to the game so that we will be able to rely in a long-term retention, the tail, and that will actually change the cycles of the game, the cycles of the user acquisition. On top of that, something that happened that is really related also to what happened in the market, as we saw in the first slide, is that when investing start coming to hyper-casual, investors start going also from hyper-casual to studios, hyper-casual to studios. And this generated a big boost in terms of PPP, paper prototype model. That is a very well-known model in the industry. So right now that investings are stopped coming to publishers, publishers are also stop investing in things without a proven ability of generating something different, something that will bring quality, something unique. So we can expect that the PPP approach will change, and to be able to work on a PPP basis, studios and hyper-casual publishers, the quality will be in the center of the discussion. Of course, that based on this, hyper-casual publishers also need to adapt in order to provide services that more complex game require. That means we need to provide 3D artist services. We need to provide Unity developer services. We need to provide services that weren't that relevant in the past, but are relevant right now due to the complexity of the games that are likely to succeed.
Yeah, great point. And actually, something we were discussing a while ago is that in the end, I'm working with a lot of gaming studios, a lot of gaming developers in EMEA. Some of them are really big, hyper-casual studios as well. And one trend I'm seeing from hyper-casual is that some of them are starting to do some casual games with high retention, like looking at the UI more into detail. They're even acquiring some casual games. Is this a trend you are considering as a company, like moving more to casual to higher retentions, or this is something you're not interested in now?
Actually, what we are doing right now, that we started to do already, is we're setting the basis to start engaging in more complex hyper-casual games. The trend for casual games, it has been there for a while. It's for many big publishers the natural flow of how to be sustainable, because as we discussed, only by growing a business won't be sustainable, and it's not healthy, and will end up failing eventually. So what we are doing right now is we are restructuring all of our activity in order to provide the services that hyper-casual developers need to achieve a better quality of product. The focus right now, we are putting on the product and how the product should improve and what services we need to provide to be able not only to adapt to this trend, but also to catch those niche markets that are not easy to find, but definitely worth finding them.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Gabriel, for sharing all these details. So actually,